It is my birthday, and I am standing in the middle of my own living room holding a glass of wine I have completely forgotten about, because I am staring at my dead mother's ring on another woman's hand. I would know that ring anywhere. The deep green stone. The thin gold band worn soft by 60 years of my mother wearing it every single day. The tiny engraving inside that I cannot see from across the room but that I know by heart, because I have read it 100 times since she died. It is the single most precious object I own in this world. It has been locked in a box in my bedroom since the funeral, and right now it is sitting on the finger of a smiling woman named Gabrielle, whom my husband introduced to me 20 minutes ago as someone from work, and who is laughing at his jokes across a room full of my friends wearing my mother on her hand. I have not moved in what feels like an hour. It has probably been 4 seconds. This is the story of the next 90 minutes, and the days that followed, and I am going to tell it to you the way I lived it, in real time, from the moment I recognized that ring to the moment I got it back. Stay with me. Because I did not make a scene at my own birthday party. I did something much quieter and much more permanent. But before the 90 minutes begin, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. What is the one object you own that could never, ever be replaced, the thing that isn't about money at all, but about a person, a memory, a love you can't get back? Picture it right now, and then imagine seeing it on the hand of the person your spouse was cheating with. That is where I am standing as this story begins. Tell me what your irreplaceable thing is in the comments. I read every single one. And to anyone watching who has lost a parent, and who knows exactly the kind of object I'm describing, that one thing that still smells like them, or holds the shape of their hand, or carries a love you can never get back, I want to say something gently before we go on. I know that to some people, a story about a ring might sound like a story about a thing. It isn't. When you've lost someone, certain objects stop being objects. They become the last physical place that person still lives. They are how you hold a hand that isn't here anymore. So if this story makes you clutch a little at whatever your version of the ring is, that's not foolishness. That's love, still doing its work. Keep that thing close. Know where it is, and never apologize for how much it matters. Real time. Second 5. I make myself breathe. My first instinct, the instinct of every cell in my body, is to walk across that room, take that woman by the wrist, and pull my mother's ring off her finger in front of everyone. And I want you to understand how close I came to doing exactly that. Because the restraint I found in the next few seconds is the entire reason this story ends well, instead of ending with me as the one who looks unhinged in everyone's memory of the night. I dig my nails into my own palm, and I do not move, because some cold, clear voice underneath the roaring tells me, not like this. Not here. Not yet. If you explode now, you will get 4 seconds of satisfaction, and you will hand him the next 4 months. Watch, confirm, then decide. I want to talk about that cold, clear voice for a second, because I have come to believe it is one of the most important things a person can learn to hear. In the worst moments of our lives, there are really 2 voices. There is the loud one, the roar of pure pain, which wants only to act, to lash out, to make the unbearable feeling stop right now by doing something dramatic. And then there is the quiet one underneath, the one that can see 10 minutes and 10 months ahead at the same time. The one that knows the difference between feeling better for an instant and actually being better off. Almost everyone hears the loud voice. It drowns everything else out. The whole trick, the entire difference between the people who get destroyed by moments like this and the people who walk out of them whole, is learning to find the quiet voice in the middle of the roar and do what it says. At my own birthday party, with my mother's ring on another woman's hand, the loud voice was deafening. But I found the quiet one. And the quiet one said, "This is the most important night of your life, and you are not going to waste it on 4 seconds of satisfaction." So I breathe, and I smile the practiced birthday girl smile, and I begin very quietly to gather information. Real time. Minute 2. I need to be sure, because a tiny, desperate part of me is still hoping I am wrong, that it's a similar ring, a coincidence, that grief is making me see my mother everywhere. So I drift, casually, glass in hand, through my own party, the gracious hostess, until I am close enough to Gabrielle to see her hand properly. And it is not a similar ring. It is the ring. The exact green of the stone I watched on my mother's hand my entire childhood. The same soft, thin band. There is no coincidence on earth that produces that ring twice. The only thing I cannot see is the engraving inside, and I do not need to, because I already know, the way you know your own name, that it is there. Real time. Minute 4. I look at my husband. Wesley is standing near Gabrielle, relaxed, charming, holding court. And now that I am really looking, I can see it. The thing I have apparently been refusing to see for who knows how long. The way his hand finds the small of her back for half a second when he thinks no one is watching. The private little glance. The ease of two people who know each other far, far better than a man and someone from work. He brought her here. To my birthday. In my home. And he put my dead mother's ring on her hand to do it. If your chest just went tight imagining that level of cruelty your spouse's affair partner, wearing your late mother's ring. At your own birthday party, do me one quick favor before I tell you what I did next. Tap like and subscribe to the channel. I'm not asking for nothing. These calm, real-time revenge stories get buried by the algorithm unless people actually engage. And your one tap is the only reason the next one reaches a woman who needs, tonight, to know she can get through something like this with her dignity intact. And believe me, what I did over the next few days to get my mother's ring back is the part you came for. Real time. Minute 15. I understand the by mistake. Because here is the thing I pieced together. Watching them, Gabrielle does not know. I can see it on her face. She is wearing that ring openly, happily, with no idea of what it is or whose it was. Which means Wesley never told her. He gave her my mother's ring and let her believe it was just a beautiful gift from a generous man, a vintage piece. Maybe. Something he'd found. She has no idea she is wearing a dead woman's wedding ring to that dead woman's daughter's birthday party. She wore it tonight by mistake, the simple mistake of not knowing that the lovely ring on her finger was the single most loaded object in the entire house. Her ignorance is its own small evidence. You don't accidentally wear stolen grief unless someone handed it to you as something else. And strangely, understanding that Gabrielle didn't know changed something in me, right there in real time. I had walked into the evening well, into the catastrophe of the evening, ready to hate her with my whole heart. She was the other woman. She was wearing my mother. Of course I hated her. But watching her laugh, oblivious, that ring catching the light on a hand that had no idea what it was carrying, I felt the hatred shift its target. Because she wasn't the one who had gone into my bedroom. She wasn't the one who had opened the box where my mother had lived since the funeral. She wasn't the one who knew what that ring was and chose to give it away anyway. Wesley was. Gabrielle was, in her own way, just another person he had handed a beautiful lie to. Hers was prettier than mine, and it sat on her finger instead of in her chest. But it was still a lie he'd told. My fury found its real address that night, and its real address was not the woman in the borrowed ring. It was the man who had robbed a grave to fill her hand. Real time. Minute 30. I make a decision, and I keep smiling. I decide that I will get through this party, that I will not give Wesley, or this night, the gift of my collapse. I will be the radiant host. I will blow out my candles. I will thank everyone for coming. And underneath the smile, I will be running, very calmly, the most important set of calculations of my life. Because the ring is not just an emotional catastrophe. The ring is a fact. And facts can be used. I want to be honest about how hard those next 90 minutes were, because I think the calm I am describing can sound almost superhuman, and it wasn't. It was the hardest performance of my life. I blew out candles while a woman wore my mother across the room. I thanked people for coming while my marriage quietly ended inside my chest. I posed for a photograph, it turned out, that would later become part of my evidence smiling, with Gabrielle's hand and my mother's ring visible just over my shoulder. Every minute of that party, I was holding two completely separate realities in my body at once. The gracious birthday girl on the outside, and on the inside, a daughter in free fall, doing math. I don't tell you this to make myself sound strong. I tell you because if you are ever in a version of this moment, I want you to know that the calm is not the absence of pain. The calm is a choice you make on top of the pain, breath by breath, because you have decided that your future self deserves better than whatever your most wounded self would do in the next 60 seconds. The pain was total. The calm was a decision. Both were true. Real time. The next morning, I open the box. The party is over. Wesley is asleep. And at 6 a.m, I go to the box in my bedroom where my mother's ring has lived since the funeral, and I open it, already knowing what I will find. And I find it. The small velvet slot where the ring should be. Empty. He went into the one place that was purely, sacredly mine, and he took the one thing that could never be replaced, and he gave it to her. Standing there at 6 a.m., holding an empty box, I do something that surprises me. I do not cry. I get very, very calm. Because grief, I am learning in real time, can transform into something else if you let it into resolve. I had spent the months since my mother's death thinking of grief as a weight, something that sat on your chest and made everything heavier and slower. And it is that. But standing at 6 a.m, holding that empty velvet box, I discovered grief can also be fuel, if you point it correctly. Because what is grief, really, except love with nowhere left to go? And love is the most powerful force a person has. All that love I had for my mother, all of it suddenly had a job. Protect the last piece of her. Get her ring back. Do not let this man's cruelty be the final chapter of her story in my life. The sorrow didn't go away. It just stopped being a thing that happened to me and became a thing that moved me. And a woman moved by love for her mother, acting calmly and lawfully and with absolute clarity, is not someone you want to find yourself across a table from. Wesley had no idea what he had just woken up. Now the spiral slows, and the plan begins. I need you to understand the choice I was making in those quiet days, because it ran against every instinct I had. The whole time, my husband was sleeping beside me, eating breakfast across from me, kissing me goodbye, with absolutely no idea that I had stood in my own bedroom at 6 a.m. holding the empty box where my mother used to be. Living next to that secret was its own kind of agony. But it was also the source of all my power. The moment I let it show, the moment I confronted him, I would lose every advantage I had, the documentation he didn't know I was gathering, the lawyer he didn't know I'd seen, the simple clarity of acting before he could prepare. So I held the secret, and it was heavy, and I held it anyway, because I had decided that my mother's ring was worth more than the relief of finally screaming. I did not wake Wesley up. I did not confront him with the empty box. Because by then I understood the shape of what I was dealing with, and I understood that my power lay entirely in him not yet knowing that I knew. So, for the next few days, I became the calmest version of myself I have ever been, while underneath I did 3 things. First, I documented. The affair, now that my eyes were open, was not hard to confirm through entirely ordinary. Lawful means the easy familiarity, the patterns, the woman he'd been bold enough to bring into my home. And the ring, I had photographs from my own birthday party, photographs other guests had cheerfully taken and posted, in which my mother's ring is clearly visible on Gabrielle's hand. I had my mother's documentation of the ring, the appraisal, the insurance record, even an old photograph of it, on her own hand, engraving and all. I built a quiet, complete file proving exactly what that ring was, that it was mine, and where it had ended up. There was something almost healing about building that file, and I didn't expect it. Because the act of gathering my mother's appraisal, her old photographs, the records of the ring's history, meant spending hours with images of her hand, her ring, her life. I had been avoiding all of it since the funeral, too painful to look at. But now I had a reason to look, a purpose that pulled me through the pain instead of leaving me stuck in it. And as I assembled the proof that the ring was hers, and therefore mine, I also reassembled her. A little, in my own mind, remembered the way she gestured with that hand. The way the stone caught the light when she cooked, the day she'd told me it would be mine someday. Wesley had tried to turn my mother's ring into a tool for his betrayal. In gathering the truth of it, I turned it back into what it had always been. A record of a woman who loved me, and whom I was now fighting to keep. The file was evidence. It was also, quietly, a way of holding my mother's hand one more time. Second, I went to a lawyer, and she told me 3 things I will never forget. The first, let's be very clear about this ring. You inherited it from your mother. That makes it your separate property, not a marital asset. Not his, not something he had any right whatsoever to give away. When he took it and gave it to another woman, he gave away something that was legally and entirely yours. You are absolutely entitled to get it back. The second, she explained that a spouse giving away the other spouse's separate, inherited property to an affair partner is not just morally grotesque, it is the kind of thing that does real damage to his position in a divorce. Between the documented affair and the documented misappropriation of my inherited property, I was walking in with an exceptionally strong, clean case, built almost entirely out of his own choices. And the third thing she said, quietly, was the one that steadied me most. She said, "You will get your mother's ring back. Hold on to that. Whatever else this costs you, that ring is yours by law, and we will get it returned to you. He does not get to keep it, and neither does she." I held on to that sentence for days. In all the swirl of grief and rage and strategy, it was the one solid thing. The law was on the side of the daughter, not the man who'd robbed her. There was something almost maternal in how my lawyer said it, and I think she understood the way good lawyers do that for me this was never really about the divorce. It was about a ring. It was about my mother. The marriage I could lose. Her I could not. Third, with my documentation complete and my lawyer ready, I prepared for the conversation, the only conversation. And I want to tell you how that conversation went, because it is the quiet center of this entire story. I did not scream at Wesley. I sat him down, and I placed 3 things on the table between us. A photograph from my birthday party, showing Gabrielle's hand and my mother's ring. The empty velvet box. And the appraisal in my mother's name. And I watched him understand, in stages, exactly how much I knew, and exactly how far past forgivable he had gone. It is one thing to cheat. It is another to reach into your wife's grief, take the one irreplaceable thing she has left of her mother, and decorate your girlfriend with it. there is no charming your way out of that. There is no it's not what it looks like for an empty box and a photograph. That is the quiet power of evidence over accusation, and it is worth understanding even if you are never in a situation like mine. When you accuse someone, you give them something to argue with your interpretation, your tone, your version of events. Accusation invites debate, but an empty box does not invite debate. A photograph from your own birthday party does not invite debate. An appraisal in your dead mother's name does not invite debate. I did not need to convince Wesley of anything, because I did not put my feelings on the table. I put facts on the table, and facts cannot be argued with the way feelings can. He could not tell me I was overreacting. Because I wasn't reacting at all, I was simply showing him what was already true. This is why, in the hardest moments, the calm path and the strong path turn out to be the same path. The person with the documentation never has to raise their voice, because the documents are already speaking, and they only ever say one thing. This happened, and here is the proof. He tried, of course. He said he'd meant to ask me. He said he didn't think I ever even wore it. He said he was going to explain. And I let him talk, because every word he said confirmed that he had never once understood what that ring actually was. To him it had been a pretty object, an asset, something to repurpose into a romantic gesture. To me, it was my mother's hand in mine. The fact that he could not tell the difference told me everything about why this marriage was already over. And I realized, listening to his excuses, that this was the truest thing the whole catastrophe had revealed truer even than the affair. People will tell you that the worst betrayals are about sex, or money, or lies. But I think the very worst betrayal is when someone shows you they cannot perceive what is sacred to you. The affair told me Wesley was unfaithful. The ring told me something far more final, that he did not, could not, see the inside of my life at all. He had lived beside my grief for months and understood so little of it that he could mistake the most sacred object I owned for a spare bauble to repurpose. You can sometimes rebuild after an affair, if both people understand what was broken. But you cannot teach someone to see what is holy to you if they have proven, with an empty box and a photograph, that they were never looking. That was the moment I stopped grieving the marriage. You don't grieve a thing once you finally see it clearly for what it always was. I said the only sentence I had prepared. I said, Wesley, you didn't give away a ring. You gave away my mother. And you're going to get her back for me. Because the law says she was never yours to give. The ring came back. That was non-negotiable. And the law was completely on my side. Because inherited property is exactly that mine. Gabrielle, when she finally learned what the ring actually was, that the vintage piece her boyfriend had so generously given her was his wife's dead mother's wedding ring, taken from a grieving daughter's bedroom, was, I am told, horrified, and returned it without a fight. I'd like to think some small part of her humanity recoiled at what she'd unknowingly been wearing. The divorce itself was clean and strong, because the affair was documented and his treatment of my inherited property did him no favors at all in the eyes of anyone deciding what was fair. But none of the settlement is what I remember. What I remember is the afternoon the ring was returned to me, and I sat alone at my kitchen table, and I opened my palm, and there it was, the deep green stone, the soft thin band, and inside, the engraving I knew by heart, my mother's initials and the date she'd been given it, more than 60 years ago. I slid it onto my own finger, the way she used to slide it onto hers, where it fit as though it had simply been waiting for me all along. And for the first time since my birthday, I let myself cry. Not the collapse I'd refused to give Wesley. Something cleaner. The cry of a daughter who had almost lost the last piece of her mother and had quietly, lawfully fought her way to getting it back. I sat with that ring on my finger for a long time that afternoon, turning it in the light the way she used to. And I thought about how close the story had come to ending differently. If I had crossed that room at my birthday party and torn it off Gabrielle's hand in a rage, here is what would have happened. There would have been a scene, witnessed by all my friends. Wesley would have spun it, she's grieving, she's unstable, she humiliated a guest. You should have seen her. The story would have become about my behavior, not his betrayal. And the ring might well have stayed lost in the chaos, or become a contested object in an ugly fight, instead of the simple, clean matter of law it turned out to be. The 4 seconds of satisfaction would have cost me my mother's ring and my dignity in one move. Instead, I traded those 4 seconds for a calm morning, a careful file, a good lawyer, and the lawful, permanent return of the only thing that truly mattered. That is the trade, every time. Rage is expensive. Patience is how you afford what you actually want. And if you'll let me leave you with one thing, not just as someone who got revenge, but as a daughter who watched her mother's ring walk into her own birthday party on a stranger's hand, it's this. There are some things a person can do to you that tell you, instantly and completely, who they really are. Cruelty toward what you grieve is one of them. When someone reaches into your sorrow and treats your most sacred thing as a convenient object, believe what they have just shown you, all the way down. And do not argue with it, but also know this. The things that are truly, legally, deeply yours have a way of finding their way home. If you stay calm enough to claim them properly instead of snatching them back in a rage that lets the other person make you the villain. Protect what matters. Know what is yours. And when someone shows you they cannot tell the difference between an object and a love, let them go. And take your mother's ring with you. The people who truly love you will treat the things you grieve as holy. The ones who don't will hand your grief to a stranger and call it a gift. I keep my mother's ring in the box still. Most days the same box Wesley emptied, but now I open it on purpose. On the hard days and the good ones. And I take her ring out and wear it for a while, and I put it back. The box that once held an absence holds her again. And every time I open it, I am reminded of the strangest gift this whole ordeal gave me. I almost lost the last piece of my mother, and in fighting calmly to get it back, I ended up holding her more deliberately, more gratefully than I had since the day she died. Wesley meant to take her from me. Instead, he reminded me exactly how much she was worth, and made me fight for her. And handed me without ever meaning to the experience of choosing her, claiming her, bringing her home. There is a kind of justice in that the law could never have delivered. He tried to give my mother away. He only made me hold her tighter. There's one more thing, though. A few weeks after I got the ring back, my mother's old jeweler, the man who had originally sized that ring decades ago, called me. Because Gabrielle had brought it to him once to be cleaned, and he'd noticed something about it. Something hidden that even I had never known was there. Something my mother had apparently meant for me to find one day. What was concealed in my mother's ring, and what it revealed about a secret she'd kept my whole life, is a story entirely its own. And it might just be the most moving one yet. It's right there on your screen. You are going to want to see how that one ends.